bank account. I'm too scared to check my bank account. I don't afford to check my bank account. I'm too scared to check my bank account.
That will never not be good. What we have to do is welcome everybody to the Webflow show, where we take all things Webflow serious and Lewis Cole's bank account seriously, and quite frankly, nothing else. As always, your boys, Hein and Matt are here, drop another banger for you. Absolutely not a skip. So, if you're feeling the vibes, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for future shows, and make sure you never miss out on the most fun you can possibly have talking design, Webflow, and no-code dev. So, hold on to your butts, and let's start the show. And we're going to do that with a serious question. Matt, let's look at a breakdown of that song and video that we just all enjoyed. So why don't you give me a rundown of what you saw, a play-by-play, if you will.
Absolutely. And buckle up, because I prepared a 30-part docu-series on this topic. I'm just kidding, kind of.
Some Ken Burns level breakdown.
Yeah, exactly. We're actually looking at Ken Burns, like maybe he can produce, give us some notes, what have you. But clearly we have a lot of thoughts on this. It's a classic that we've talked about having as a cold open probably since before we even thought about this show.
It's why we started the show, quite frankly.
Yeah, exactly. This is just a vehicle for that. Yeah, I mean, the funniest part about that is the song itself is so good, just like as a song, and it has no business being, which I think ultimately, it's a good testament to quality that you can make the most ridiculously weird thing ever. And then if you have the like craft level to just like actually produce it, it's amazing. So it's sort of too good to be a funny YouTube video, which makes it even funnier. And then obviously, like on a personal note, it reminds me of my like very, very poor days in California when I was like literally sitting at the table being like, okay, this is how many dollars I have to eat this week. And then you're like, or this is how many dollars I need to eat this week. And then you're like, wonder what the old bank account says. And like literal terror then happens, I think, at that point. But ultimately, LaBerge, I'm going to go with that pronunciation, who commented, I think it's the top comment, that I think really sums that feeling up. And he says, quote, "After over 2 years of watching this video, I can finally not relate to this song anymore. And I'm so fucking proud of myself." So shout out to that critical moment in life where this video is just funny and there's not like a tinge of terror that comes through.
I think that transitions well into our next thing, which is we both still have a sense of terror at looking at our YouTube Webflow show bank account. So let's go ahead and shoot it over to our sponsor that's diminishing that terror a little bit.
Dead air.
All right. We're still with the dead air sponsor, which means we don't currently have a sponsor for the show. So that means Matt and I are both terrified of looking at our Webflow show bank account. So you all can help change that by subscribing to the show. If you want to sponsor the show, please reach out to your boys and let's make this a thing. Make us feel like LaBerge. We don't want it to be 2 years, hopefully. So let's change that for us. And before we get into some real stuff here, and we said we could talk about this freaking video and song forever, I want to quickly look at the camera one, wherever it is, and I'm going to make a plea to all banks out there. You need to make this song your hold music. It doesn't make any sense that it's not your hold music song. Like, I love Dave Brubeck's Take 5 if you're doing that, but it doesn't make sense. Make this your hold music. And
Dave's
with that,
bank account, fine.
Yeah,
Probably fine, as jazz artists go, at least.
Exactly. So with that, we're going to wrap things up here with Lewis Cole. Thank you for that play-by-play. And we're going to check into our main event. Check it. Hope everybody saw what I did there. And today, we're going to be talking about how you can use your website effectively as a tool to support your company's scale and growth. We've covered this in other videos, how there are a metric shit ton of challenges a marketing team deals with. But the too long didn't read of it is, as a business grows, complications grows with it. Mo scale, mo problems, as I believe a little known rapper named Biggie Smalls once said. So the name of the game is efficiency, and your website is a great tool to help you be more efficient. If it weren't, we wouldn't be talking about it because this is literally a show about websites. Now, we know what you're thinking. My website, anything but efficient, is quite the opposite, quite frankly. And we totally get it. So we're here today to share 3 ways that you can jazz up your website to be the belle of the efficiency ball. So let's start with the big question here first. So Matt, why should marketing teams look to their website to help them scale and grow their business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a strategic question to begin with, and we love talking some good strategy on the show. But it's the foundation of your digital marketing strategy. So, like, we'll talk a little bit about what we mean by that. Like, it's kind of and more, obviously, since pandemic or just as the internet matures in the business world, like it's your home base and anchor for your key marketing campaigns and even your brand in a lot of cases. So, you're using it to connect with customers. That's maybe the first place that they see that you exist, the first and most likely place that you're going to interact with them. And you want to create memorable interactions, obviously, so that they might come back, buy again or buy for the first time, and help them just understand what they need to do, like as quickly and easily as possible. Like the bottom line, though, is it's a journey, right? You're probably not going to get all that stuff right, even like as talented or as much time as you take. You're not going to get that right on the like first launch. Your website is not static. It's not a billboard, although like we've sort of in some ways learned to sort of treat it that way. But if you want it to really, fill up that bank account, we're going to just call back 100, see how many callbacks we can do that video. If you really want it to like actually, close sales for you, or, like move people down that marketing funnel, like it needs to evolve over time. You need to use your analytics to make those changes. You need to use like, what your customers are saying, and you just can't neglect it and expect good results. And it might even work really well right out of the gate, right? But things change. You have new products that come out. You find out something is more important to your business than you originally thought, and your website needs to, as efficiently as possible, reflect those things that you learn over time.
With that said, I think the thing that you mentioned there that was key that we always mention to people is the fact that your website isn't static. It's never done. It's a living, breathing, organic thing. And keeping up with the changes and everything like that, man, that sounds like a whole lot of work.
It is. And it's one of those things also like that which we wish was much easier. And obviously we're talking about some ways that we can do that today, but there is no easy button you can press. Like, the marketing of all these types of platforms are going to tell you that. And it's just an easier button, right? Like you still have to kind of check in with your site. Like so much of the onus is still on you. And a lot of what we're talking about today is like diminishing that time that you're spending, like, messing around with your website so that you can increase that time that you're spending to update the marketing messages, getting those new landing pages actually live, whatever it might be. Like we want to take that amount of time down as far as we possibly can so that these changes do happen and they don't feel like a quarterly project or something. Like it shouldn't feel that way.
Right. Yeah. So with that in mind, what is the first way that folks can build a website that is efficient and can grow with them?
Yeah, it's a little jargony sounding sometimes, but like using visual first tools like really help cut down on time spent and spend. And we'll talk about like what does that mean. So, visual first is actually what it means or what it sounds like it means. And that's to say, like, instead of looking at lines of code, instead of, tweaking these like highly technical looking things, you really can like see what's happening on your webpage, from the copy to the photos used to the design and layout. You can see it, not just your designer, not just your dev, like your whole marketing team can see how this is going to play out as well and sort of collaborate on what changes actually need to be made, instead of saying, here's some new copy, and then the designer figures that out, and then it goes back and they say it's too long. Visual tools really help that back and forth. And obviously that back and forth, the less of that, the more efficient this process is going, the less hemming and hawing. That, I think that's a thing. That is happening throughout the process, the fewer feedback meetings and loops that you have. And, websites are much less prone to those lengthy development timelines that we talk about so often. And those are the things that jam up marketing. They can't get timely messaging out. They can't get timely updates out, and things just aren't quite in alignment. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like your customers feel the general disjointedness sometimes of that, right? And it just makes it feel a little weird. They might not even consciously know, but those things can affect our likelihood of adding to cart, whatever that looks like for your business. And we want to remove as much of that friction as possible, not only in that cycle for your team, but it kind of shows out in different ways for your customer experience as well.
Yeah. We talk about this so much that we actually made an episode entirely around it and why we are Webflow fanboys. So you're welcome for the fact that we just encourage you to watch another video of ours instead of this current one that you're watching, which I don't think it's great for our like analytics, but whatever. That's not the game we're playing here. We're not taking that seriously. Anyways, so how can marketers use these visual design tools to speed up their lengthy development timelines?
I would say with no marketing language at all, a visual development platform that puts the power back into the hands of marketers.
A tool like Webflow, I think it's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, exactly. The visual first tools, again, like this is really about tightening up your processes because of just making collaboration much easier. We're all visual learners, some of us like more than others, but it gets into like, the visual language of things is the one that we all can kind of see and sort of understand as quickly as possible. Devs might not understand marketing languages. A lot of marketers certainly are not trying to understand programming languages, and then design languages are in there as well. So there's actually a lot of different, ways to talk about things, and a lot gets lost in that. And visual just puts that kind of to bed as much as possible. If even at the point of it just bringing up like, oh, hey, what as a dev, like, what does this look like there? Can you do this? Or as a designer, you can kind of all see it together and understand the level of work that it might take, or how big of a change that it is, or, well, if we do that, there's less room for copy. And visual tools just make that so much more intuitive. Like you're not even really having conversations about it. You can just see how different changes and ideas might help or harm things. And that's one of the hardest parts of these kinds of processes, right? Is you don't really know until you see it if it's quite right. And that's certainly true of your customers at the end of these processes, because like they don't see the process, right? Like they don't have any of the context. They're just showing up trying to buy something that's helpful or something that they like.
Yeah, absolutely. I immediately kind of think of the fact that like what's the visual design tool, we can, when we get a request to change something, we don't have to then take it into a QA scenario because we're literally QAing it as we do it because we're seeing the change in front of us. So we can publish that with like some confidence. Now we'll always try to push it to staging first to verify and make sure the clients are happy with it. But again, just that right there alone just cut down on a lot of kind of what its development timelines would look like. And, it helps us feel confident that we can say we can help our clients take things down from like months down to days, or what would take hours down to minutes. And at the end of the day, I'm bad at math, which is probably why I was also too very scared of looking into my bank account, because I was not very good at keeping track of my monies at some point in my life. But yeah, these changes sound like a big change. So obviously, number one here is in order to help make your website efficient, is that you need a tool like Webflow that is actually efficient. So if you're not rolling with Webflow, holler at your boys, take a look at it. But it's going to be real hard to make your website efficient if you're not using the right tool. But if they are on Webflow, what's another way to make your website efficient? Particularly, like I said, particularly for teams that are already using a visual development tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody get ready. We're talking about audits. We're going to talk about auditing and optimizing your website. This is the part that everybody's been waiting for. But
I definitely have
yeah,
been.
and it's like we're making fun of it, but really you kind of should, right? Especially like one of the things like you mentioned, if you're already on Webflow, this is kind of a huge bonus that gets overlooked a lot. Is it's really easy to kind of do these audits and optimizations. Webflow is great about kind of baking these opportunities in. In some ways, they're automating a lot of it, so it's sort of happening without you knowing. But you know, it gets back to the theme of like the website is never done, right? And auditing and optimization is a lot of how you continue to improve your website. And it's also kind of this boring sounding thing that keeps you engaged with your website. Like this is sort of a like non, you know, mathematical like thing as we talk about math a bit, but like it keeps you like set yourself a reminder to kind of run just the internal Webflow audit tools. It helps you notice improvements that you might need to make or optimizations that you might need to make, just because you know you're always going to check in with the website and what's kind of going on with it. If that annoying dude Matt Hansen uploaded a like 4 GB photo and your site performance is down, Webflow takes care of that in a lot of ways automatically. But you're able to audit and optimize for those things, and they can make a big difference, right? Like it might be a beautiful picture that looks really good, but it's loading really slowly for people who don't have like super fast internet, which is most people, especially in the mobile device world. So those little things are great, and it's a great way to, again, just kind of keep that habit of logging into your website and just running these tools. You can do a lot of positive things just by going through these like routine audits and optimizations of photos, of just checking in with how things look on a phone. Like these types of things happen, and as we update, like they can get missed. And it's one of these things too that doesn't rely on a big project to be happening, again, for you to kind of log in, take a step back from time to time and assess how well your website's performing, and not just the Google page speed kind of stuff, right? Like just these things that every website needs. You can't just, even with your car, to kind of overuse that analogy, it always works well because every so often you need to get your oil changed, at least that part, right? You don't need your analytics dashboard to tell you, like you shouldn't be waiting for that. It's just sort of like, hey, I know every 5,000 miles this needs to be done. So maybe that's every couple of weeks. Just pop in, make it a really quick, easy task for yourself instead of holding it off. Plus, again, you also might see some things that pop up as a marketer that you could be doing better because you're in there, right? It's not it's a living thing now.
Yeah, and it's definitely, I think when you hear it out loud, it all sounds really intuitive, and it's always something we try to drive home with our clients, particularly when we talk about really wanting them to take ownership of their website. We really mean a lot of this. Like, obviously, a big part of it is being able to have the ability and confidence to design and build out their website as the business grows. We want the website to grow with it. But really, at the end of the day, it's kind of this part of it that I think a lot of people just don't know how to audit or really how to do it. And I think a lot of that is kind of like, well, where do I look? What am I looking at? So you use that car analogy already. Like what to look out for, like, hey, every 5,000 miles, I need to get an oil change. What are some things that people can be looking out for, questions they could be asking to as they evaluate and look at their website?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the same things I think that, we run people through in workshops, or even marketers do for themselves when they're about to make a new website, right? Like it just like these things happen again, like in sort of way too static of a way to say the word way many times. So I think starting like right with just like broader questions even is, are the high value pages on our website user friendly? Like we can all sort of do that even in a non-technical way. It's like there's so many like top 47 things to make sure your website's user friendly, that are somewhat helpful. But at the end of the day, like if you're selling hockey sticks on your website, like probably something about your audience and who's going there. Like load that thing up. Like, is this the easiest way to get the newest, best product, your like most helpful product? Or are you still showing them that demo video from when you were building the new product that's now out or whatever? those are just broad things that you can really do without logging in. But if you're on that back end, you might be able to make quick changes, right? Sometimes it's as simple as not saying get started. It's, buy the hockey stick, or, like change your game, or whatever it might be. Those things make a huge difference because it feels like you're speaking to them a little bit. And sometimes, even if you aren't sure, but conversions aren't where you expect, just trying something new in a few seconds can really be at least information that you're gaining. So always just super important to ask that. And, that can get down into another point, which is making sure that it's mobile optimized. And that means different things for different people. But going back to the user friendly part, again, does the desktop version work really great for the story you're trying to tell? And then it kind of loses something, like stuff's now below the fold potentially on your mobile phone, right? On the new size iPhone that rolled out for some reason is a different screen size. Like, these are things, again, like, should be constantly checking in, especially if that device matters to your audience. And iPhones matter to basically everybody's audience at this point. So is it looking good on the large iPhone and the small iPhone? And is that important to your audience? So we're going for it just being intuitive, right? Like getting from A to B as fast as possible to that all important CTA that you all have spent a long time probably thinking about. Like, is the new product launch front and center? Like, making sure that your audience knows it even exists. Like, that's an easy one that gets missed all the time, just because website updates are hard, right? You're like, you guys have spent so much money and time making this new product, and it's like a month-long thing now to put your new product front and center on the homepage. That's rough. And it shouldn't be that way. So these are things you should be constantly looking for, even way up front. If you know you have a product launch, even like as a thought exercise, right? It's like, we know we're working on new products. Maybe it's not till next year. What does that look like to sort of to make that new product page, or to put it in the banner of the homepage? Like, what would happen? And if it feels daunting to you, it shouldn't. So those are like basic things you can kind of look at. You want to make sure it can showcase your CEO's favorite color as quickly as possible. Just kidding. That's not important at all. Your CEO is probably your least likely client. Shout out to all the CEOs out there. Please still hire us. We're having some fun with it. But it gets back to, and kind of ties into that part. It's like, is your messaging compelling, like, and relevant? Like, even are the colors, are they relevant? Like, is it aligning with what your brand actually is supposed to look like? That kind of stuff. You'd be surprised how quickly those things can kind of slip off, right? You had a freelancer make a bunch of graphics because you really needed them. Maybe they weren't quite right because you had to go fast, or whatever it might be. You can optimize and audit for those things. Like, there might be quick changes you can make. You might be able to say, well, that's the best that we have for now, but when we work with the freelancer next quarter, like, we're going to have them align that a little bit better. There are just ways, again, as we get back to it being strategic, right? You can kind of put some of these things out and figure out, oh, can I attack these really easily? And with Webflow or visual like tools, most of them you can, and often the most important ones you can. It's that like old trick of like, sometimes things that you do really quickly don't feel important because it only took you 5 minutes. But a lot of times those are the biggest changes that you can make. Just little tweaks are super valuable. And what a little tweak is a lot bigger bucket of important items with a visual learner, or a visual designer, or visual tool than it used to be, just because you can kind of do it on your own, or you can spot the issue really quickly. And then you don't have to send it to 14 teams to, make sure the radius of your CTA button is rounded or whatever, because one looks weird. Like, these little things matter a lot. And it's cool when something that takes 90 seconds makes a big difference, makes your brand look better, makes the homepage, like, it's all about that above fold, right? So like, really making sure that that's doing its job is like an enormous part of the battle.
Exactly. Yeah, and these are all really great questions. And like you said, these are all the ones that we kind of always start with when we're building out a website, and ones that we keep front and center and in mind always. So always worth going back to these tried and true ones. With that said, I guess my follow for you is, if you go down this list of questions, like you're ultimately going to gather a lot of information. So I assume prioritizing them would be the next step, right?
Right. It's a great way, again, back to the old strategery. I'm one of the philosophical people that think you can actually only have one priority, but my beliefs aside, it's really important to just have a running order of, for me, it's a list of things that will be number one priorities after we cross out the one in front of it. For lack of a better way to put it, it's like find and make that list and make sure though what one you should be focused on first. Or maybe, a person on your team owns each one of them and that's their number one priority. But going back to the sort of beginning and reevaluating or evaluating what your goals are for your business and how the website can help push those forward. It might be a rebrand, it might be a new message, it might be a new product, right? Like it could be any number of these things. Your goal might be conversion rates or whatever it might be. It might be a guide that you worked on and you're tracking those downloads. That's really completely up to, your business goals and whatever your marketing priorities are. But like, let's take the guide piece, right? Like you just, your last quarter goal is to produce this guide that's helps your customers get the most out of your product, understand your product, whatever it might be. But that's not on the homepage. It's like you got to scroll all the way down to the bottom, or like you're relying on a like weird pop-up experience to get that across. Like that's not great. Like that flashes a sign right away. And when you put it in that priority context and you're aligning it with your goals, it stops you from getting into that like kind of run around of like, oh, I need to fix the SEO. I need to like let's write some new copy and all these kind of disjointed things. And none of them by themselves are a bad idea, but like the priorities are strange. Nobody knows what's most important to say about the product or where that guide should go. And oftentimes you have a weird goal like getting that guide done, but then you don't leverage it, right? Like, so going back to like, is the website, supporting that thing that we just put a lot of effort in? Like, are we showing it on every page? Should it be the main CTA right now for this campaign, whatever it might be? And then just like, it's almost like looking at your website, like, is it there? Is this really easy for me as a consumer to take advantage of and utilize? It's surprising how often it's not. And I think a lot of that comes down to how hard maybe it is to make that tweak, or how hard it has been in the past to do that on WordPress or whatever, when you just don't quite feel like you have that kind of control.
Yeah. I think an important thing to kind of like add here too, and I think you've kind of been touching on it, but just to make it explicitly clear, is that having a website is part of this, and it's always going to be a critically important thing, and that we are advocating for it to be the center of your digital marketing strategy. But at the same time, like the other part of it is that you have to know what you want out of it, right? And what you're trying to do with it. Because if you don't have that right, then you can't really get mad at the website for not doing the thing that you wanted to do because you didn't clearly set it up for that. This is a weird ass analogy, but keeping with the car thing, it's like buying a Dodge Neon and then getting mad at it because it's no good at hauling like construction equipment. It's like, I mean, you should have thought about that before you bought the Dodge Neon. Like, I know it's very tempting to buy a Dodge Neon because they're sweet ass cars, but it's just not the right car for what you want out of it. I think that's just kind of worth like calling out again, because we talk about that very clearly with our leads. Quite frankly, not even our clients, but with leads, to make sure that, hey, like, what are your business objectives here with this website? Because if you just want this thing to look nice, like, that's really not what we're in the business to do here. We want good looking websites, but we want them to serve a purpose. And what is ultimately what you want to get out of this website? You're only going to get out of it what you put into it, and part of what you put into it is this thoughtfulness of kind of like how you want to use this thing.
Yeah, and I think so much of it comes back to that, like just not viewing it as a finished product. Like this should be like a thing you're constantly talking about. Like how can we get more out of our website? How can it help us communicate better? Again, like we talked about in the previous part of this was, like we want to diminish the amount of time as much as possible to like executing these things. but you should be laser focused on executing them. And if you're not quite sure how to get that done with your current website, like that's a great opportunity to just powwow about that, like have like bring in people, like what are the roadblocks here if you don't have a visual designer, or like taking some of this information about just visual first tools, like could it solve something? Could it help you get something out the door even a week faster than you do now? Does it feel a little bit smoother? Like those things are worth revisiting your platform or your processes for, because you hear like people talking about marketing machines all the time. It's like what that actually means is they can execute on their objectives and priorities like really efficiently and quickly, and be on to the next one, right? Because there really are, like, we have so many things we want to do on our website. This is the order we want to get them done in, and we have the best platform, processes, whatever to actually see that come to life.
Yeah, and I think that segues well into our third thing that we want to talk about, how you can make a website efficient. So we have already talked about having the right tools like Webflow, making sure that you spend time auditing and assessing your website like you would a car with a health check. And now we're on to our third and final thing, which is,
I mean, right on the nose for us, like consider bringing on an agency or just additional expert support.
like
you can build that up inside your house, but right now, like the fastest way to get that done is take a look at an agency, people who really know the platforms well.
like the two clowns on the screen right now.
Girl, you silly. They ain't no clowns. What up, fellas?
More little Kev clips will be sprinkled out throughout this entire show and the lifetime of it, in addition to the Lewis Cole song.
Yeah, and that's a promise that our viewers absolutely did not ask for, but we will deliver on.
We will deliver. That will happen.
The real reason to get into, like, obviously it's like, shameless plug time, but the thing about like new platforms or these visual tools, no code tools, whatever, is like they are pretty new and they're billed as things that are like super easy to do. But like anything else, it's really just helpful to have somebody who has already spent a lot of time in it. Like it's going to help your project go faster. It's going to help you open the door to things that you maybe didn't even know were possible, like automations, design, like kind of like leveling up your design, integration of the forms, etc. So, that knowledge is what you really want to invest in, especially up front, because the awesome thing about collaborating with like really knowledgeable experts or agencies is that you're also going to learn a ton from them, like sort of through osmosis, because, like you're engaged with them, you have a specific, really important problem that you're collaborating to solve, and they can share all that expertise and best practices with you. And you can take those with you, even if you're not working with the agency in an ongoing way. Like there's so much value in doing that can give you a running start on your new platform or with your new website or your new approach to the website, whatever it might be. So we always like to sell that kind of part of it as much because of this dedication to it not being static, right? It's like we're trying to build you the greatest website ever, of course, but we really have this eye on like, well, what's going to happen when we leave? If it's 3 months after launch, if it's 6 months after launch, whatever it might be, we really want to position people to own their website. And an agency or someone who has gone through all the like failures and learnings and all that kind of stuff with hundreds and hundreds of hours in the platform or solving these same types of problems in other places is such a leg up. It's really worth it at that front end, especially to help your team learn. And because they're visual first tools, it's not like a normal thing where you're like hiring devs, right? Like you're probably not going to come out of that with knowledge of JavaScript language, right? You're going to be talking about, okay, you take that back and, get that developed. Like you don't see that part, but with this visual first like processes, like you can really take that on and ask what's going on, ask how they can do that. And sometimes that's just it makes it easier for you to place your money and your budget into the parts like, well, that's a part like we're never going to own. And you can shift things there. And it's just so valuable. And it goes back to those priorities and your strategy of like, beefing up the areas where they're really, really valuable to you, and then maybe getting educated in other areas where you can kind of take that stuff on.
Yeah. I'm going to use this like analogy only because I think there's going to be a callback to it a little later based on our script for the show is and my ability to tell the future. But it's kind of like eating sushi, right? Like there are a plethora of ways you can do this. You can make your own like sushi at home. Of course, that takes the time to make it. You have to know what you're doing. You can easily fuck it up. You have to buy the ingredients. So there's all that. So it's kind of like you building your own website, all the things that you need to kind of build your own California roll or whatever. It's going to require time and effort and honestly some learning, especially if you've never done it, and equipment that you probably don't have, like a bamboo mat. The next level up probably would be like going to your local like grocery store like Whole Foods, where you can just buy the prepackaged rolls made by some dude. Exactly, just some dude. Or and then there's obviously the tiers there, but I'm just going to jump to the very top. Or you can go to an awesome spot like one of our favorites, it's Uchi in Austin, where you can just allow the sushi chef who's like trained in this is what they do. This is all they roll out all day, every day. They know what they're doing. They have great ingredients, the best. And there's that part of it too, where they kind of cater to your taste. Like they want to know that some places will, the first one they'll give you like, and they'll just look at you and watch you and think about like, was that enough wasabi? Was that too much? That not enough? And they'll just kind of adjust it throughout the meal. And that's kind of like where I think we try to present ourselves and try to create for experience for our clients is that top level omakase eating experience where like you're there to have a good time and we'll take care of the rest, and you're gonna leave with a belly full of delicious food and unfortunately also some mercury, but that's an aside. um, but like this then takes us to our next part, which is like the elephant in the room, which is like there's money. No matter what part of this, there's going to be money involved. But particularly to hire an agency or a studio like us, you got to spend money to make money, I guess. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think maybe a easy way to think about it is like value over like like $10 in one place is not the same as $10 in another. So like where can you get the most value out of your money? And that kind of gets into your like sushi analogy. Like often like we have projects too where we're bringing in outside parties as an agency where we're obviously concerned about the budget that we've set aside for that, getting the most that we can out of it. And really what we've come to find is we recommend agencies, consultants, whatever kind of experts in whatever problem you're trying to solve, like find places that value flexibility. Because so often you get into like, we're great at custom options and things like that. Like so long as you follow our process or whatever, and processes, like we are insane about our processes. So it's not a slight to those, but we have some flexibility built in. And I think good agencies do. That's part of their process, is like understanding that those priorities might be a little different from one place to another. So ones who can help identify you in the beginning of the process as like what you actually need, and coming up with a plan to help make that happen, to get that core need, that core priority fulfilled. And obviously hopefully a couple more as well, but they understand what they can do within that budget. You're not trying to squeeze in like a worse version of what they do into that budget. So that's something I know we're always looking at, is like, did they have the flexibility there to like really work with us and get the best thing possible? Do the tools they use complement that as well?
Yeah. Well, and this is where the callback, as I was mentioning. So I'm just gonna like preemptively like spoil it for everybody. But what's a way in which like we try to be flexible with our clients, just to kind of give folks a visual, a tangible example?
Yeah, just to go back to the the Uchi experience that you mentioned before, like we offer something along those lines called the omakase, and really that's where we offer our customers the opportunity to remove the headache of web design and dev process, which is really like by design for us. It's like those are the things that we're counting on ourselves to be really good at. Like that's what we sell. And sometimes it's a great fit for a customer to just be like, I don't know anything about these two things. Like, here's our priorities. We want you all to just take our priorities. We feel like you understand us and what we want to get out of this project. And we're turning over the design and dev to you all because you do design and dev work. And like we always joke, it's like we don't take much else serious. And that's really true. Like this is the stuff we nerd out on, and that's what you want. You want to make sure that they can understand what you need and then apply what they're expert in to get you what you need. And a lot of our customers have really liked that approach because they feel like they're getting the most value. We're giving them some time back, and we're giving them some like actual money back in some cases because there's not 17 rounds of design feedback that maybe they didn't want in the first place. So that's just something like we've reserved some flexibility for us, for us. And also it helped our customers when that's a good fit get, much more value out of it. So they might've had 20K or whatever to do their launch site, but like they got a lot more out of that 20 because we didn't have to pay to be in a whole bunch of meetings, right? We actually leveled our site up because of those things. So that opened the door, and was kind of a game changer for us and how we work, but was cool to see how many clients really like to take advantage of that as well.
Yeah, exactly. So keeping with the car maintenance analogy here, like, for folks, I think people have fully grasped this already, but I'm just going to drive this idea home because I just love my analogies. Like, fun not intended, but I'm glad you caught it. It's kind of like when you take your car in and I myself, I don't know jack shit about cars. I don't really care for them. I honestly hate driving. But it would be like the car mechanic, like coming to me and be like, hey, like, this is something we need to do with your car. Like you want to solution this with me? And I just like, I don't know what to do here, man. Like just take the car and just give it back to me when it's done. Like, I don't really care how you do it. That's your responsibility. I'm just going to go and do work or just go listen to some more Lewis Cole because that's what I want to do. I don't want to be spending my time not only paying you to fix my car, but also having to figure out like how best to fix my car because that's just not my thing. And that's what the omakase, I think it's kind of giving people that back. It's like sometimes it's just a headache and it's really stressful because like we're basically asking people to make a decision about like design things and they don't necessarily know because it's not their background or forte. And and I think like sometimes clients don't feel necessarily that they are providing the best feedback or input, and they rather just skip that entirely so they can focus on things like their product or working on their pitch deck because they're trying to raise another round or whatever it may be, or they're trying to like just maybe work on an acquisition. I don't know, like whatever it may be. The possibilities are endless that they could be working on because that time is theirs now to get it back.
Yeah, and so exactly, like it gets back to like the clients that do opt into the omakase kind of approach, they get that time back, they get some peace of mind, and they know that we're designing a website that looks good and solves their problems, and they save time, money. Like often there's like an actual discount that goes into that because they have removed again that time that we would normally spend in there, or they can apply that like budget to something they didn't think was even going to be possible to get built in this phase or this round. They know they have that product launch coming out in 3 months and it could already be ready. Like, like that's a game-changing moment because they maybe already had extra money budgeted in. Like now they can go to ad spend for that product or whatever it might be. Like that's a really tangible difference, especially if you're in a startup world. Like you're launching something new where it's really important to get the word out, not just have a like beautiful looking home when people arrive at it in terms of their website. So like it really does make a difference. And that was something like we were really excited to roll out. Weren't sure if people would like kind of get into it or not. And it's been cool to see the people that have been able to take advantage of that.
Yeah. And it's been a minute since we've had a Lewis Cole callback. So like by offering the omakase, our clients don't have to be scared to check their business bank account because of that potential discount that you set there. But I think like a great example of where this like came into play, because we just kind of been talking about it in a theoretical standpoint, is we have had clients like have to spend a lot of time like getting certifications, and that's now you're dealing with like certifying bodies, and you need to provide them with like certain information and documentation that if it wasn't for the omakase, they pretty much wouldn't have had any time for us, and the website would have just dragged because we're just sitting there waiting for them to make decisions about design and stuff like that. So I mean that's an actual example of where this has been not only helpful for us to keep the project moving forward, but helpful for them so they can focus on the thing that really mattered. Because if they didn't get that certification, that pretty much would have been it for their product in their business. Yeah, I mean, this is all kind of mind blowing stuff. I think, and this I think this approach to things is a little different. So we'll definitely be making future videos around this topic of our omakase and why we do it. So another call back to the subscribe. So smash that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss out on that, because it's going to be another banger. I'm almost 100% certain of that. And with that, like before we move on to our next segment, like any other kind of like final thoughts about, bringing on an agency or a studio?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, because like we kind of went through the omakase approach. Like obviously it's important that you trust that they are expert at that thing, right? Design and dev or something. In our case, really knowledgeable about Webflow or something like that. Like it's important to whatever kind of references whatever you need to do that. But like at the highest level, hire a web design or development agency to do your web design dev. Like make sure that that's their thing. I mean, in short, don't hire a massive marketing agency that kind of is like known for their great marketing. And also they have a guy who does websites, to keep it all under one roof. It's nice when you can keep, everything all under one roof or whatever. It might make your invoicing a little bit cleaner, stuff like that. But it's like, that's not your objective, right? To have the cleanest payroll payment process for your accounting department. Sorry to the accountants that have somehow ended up on this show. I'm sorry for so many things if you're an accountant and you ended up here. Like I think that is the like really important thing to remember is like if you're trusting them with that, you want to make sure that you trust them, right? Like not just buying like this process from somebody. So, make sure that they know what they're talking about. Make sure that they have a comedically based show about the platform that they build on. I think that's number one. But in all seriousness, it's like just find people who love to do that thing, because there's a very good likelihood, obviously looking at their portfolio and things as well, but there's a very good likelihood that they're going to far exceed what you can do internally. And that's the only real reason to go outside your internal team to do it. Like, is it saving you money and you're getting something that is way better than what you could produce easily internally? Does it allow your team to, again, get that peace of mind that like you've hired somebody that's really good at this one thing that you're going to do? That's what's most important, because it probably will touch on all those business goals and things that we talked about earlier, right? Like freeing up some money for some other objectives, whatever it might be. So make sure that they can move the needle in those areas that are kind of tangible for you, other than like, that's a beautiful looking website. They did that. Like that's one part of it. But, again, aligning it back to your objectives, hiring people that are like ninjas in that thing, right? You might not need that kind of expertise in a day-to-day basis, but, that's a huge boost, and that's what you want to pay for, right? Like that's worth the money. We do that with copywriters. We do that all the time, because it's like, we could, but man, it would take a long time. And would it also be worse when we're done? Probably. Very good chance that a professional copywriter is going to not only outpace us, but also just, that's what they do. Like, and that's like, we're big fans of like, that's all you do. Great. That's awesome.
Right. Yeah. You're never going to see the Huck Finch boys roll out a copywriting show, because that's not our jam. But yeah, I mean, this is like the equivalent of like going to a diner with a 50-page menu and having any expectation that any of it's going to taste any good. Right. So, yeah, so I mean that's what we have for you today. So our 3 things that kind of help have a website that's going to be efficient, effectively and efficiently grow with you as a business is, first of all, have a visual design tool, audit and assess your website constantly, and then hire a couple clowns like us if you need kind of like that ninja skill in like this in website building, who can think about things that you may miss. Just thinking about that, you don't know what you don't know kind of thing. So we're going to move things on to our opening a can segment before we move on to some spicy nugs of wisdom. We're going to crack open a can. I actually have a can I want to open myself. It's a can of appreciation today, so not one that's out of frustration. So I want to open this can out, ironically, to the founder of Liquid Death, Mike Cesario. So we may not have just butchered one name today. We may have butchered two. So sorry about that, Mike. But I am opening this can because I recently saw an interview with him. And in it, he said something that really stuck with me. And I thought this kind of really does kind of sum up a lot of kind of like the approach and philosophy here at Huck Finch. And the thing that Mike said was that at Liquid Death, they do an exercise where they asked, what is the dumbest possible idea we could do for this? And this really, struck me right away. And I was like captivated by this. And I was like, wow, that's an interesting question to ask. And he explained that they do it because our brains are supposedly wired to repeat things that we've seen as successful in the past. So they asked this question in order to trick the brain to get out of kind of that imitation game. So you can actually think of some innovative things to do. So, I mean, I absolutely loved it. I loved it to the point where I wanted to bring this up here for all the people who are watching this. Maybe you can all apply this line of questioning to your business somehow. But yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was a really great thought exercise and even a pseudo nug, if you will.
Yeah, I love that. And just a quick context for people who don't know what Liquid Death is water. It's water, carbonated water. It's actually really good. My wife is obsessed with having like the coolest beverages in our refrigerator, so she recently converted me to Liquid Death after being like, why? But it's mostly saying that because we're not pushing the positive aspects of a guy selling like poison or something. But you can kind of get the gist almost of what he's saying in what it's called, right? Like Liquid Death is water. That was probably one of those like quote unquote dumb ideas, right? But look where they are. They're in my refrigerator, so it worked for me.
Yeah, exactly. And if Liquid Death, you want to sponsor this show, please do. We'd love to have you because both Matt and I enjoy your beverages, and we would love to get rid of that dead air. Yep. Sponsor.
Something that Mike, who I'm sure is watching this, should know is like one of our like core parts of our ideal audience is that they need water to live. So I mean, this is pretty much aimed directly at Liquid Death.
Yeah, we're hydrating their brains with Webflow nugs. That's right. Liquid Death hydrates their body.
Just rolls off the tongue. It's perfect.
Absolutely. So talking about nugs, so we're going to move on to our nugs of the day. So Matt, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of tie it in, kind of bring it to an actionable thing. There's no one size fits all when it comes to website strategy. We've been like sort of alluding to strategy as we've gone through it today. Every website is a unique snowflake, but probably not in the way we think about it. That usually comes into like the visual parts of thing. It's like you want a special shade of blue or whatever it might be. Like those are the things that are not, what are going to make your business unique or even your website. It's your product. It's your culture that sort of comes through in the website in various ways, be it color or copywriting or whatever it might be. That's what makes up your special sauce, right? And that's the thing that is actually unique if you're doing it right. Like it should be like that stew or sauce that kind of comes together with the mixture of those things. And then the website is a tool to kind of find those out. It's not picking the Pantone color of the year for your new site every year, right? Like it's not going to really move the needle. It's going to confuse people, and it doesn't really align to any of your uniqueness. So you end up not being unique, kind of chasing those things, trends, if you will. So with that in mind, a couple of parting nugs: keep your homepage and key landing pages fresh for your ideal customer. And it begs the question of like, well, how would I do that? It's like, if you don't know, you probably should, right? You should, like, that's kind of a problem, and something to like, you can stop at this nug, right, and just focus on that. Like, I'm going to go back to that optimizing and auditing part that we talked about earlier. What are some changes that might make it fresher, or at least some ideas you might have? Maybe they don't make it through for a variety of reasons, but you're asking those questions like, how would this be, just make them feel, like they're just stepping into a website that's for them. That can always be asked, and should always be asked, like, very frequently. It's never a bad question. And then the other thing too is, approaching your website like an architect would a house. And what we mean by that is having good structural integrity on the like front of your mind, in addition to making it looking fresh and exciting. This is that like form and function thing, right? Like trying to get the perfect marriage of those two things, because that structure is going to, more than anything, allow you to use this website build for a long time, right? Is it sound, you can make things fresh and exciting because you can count on the structural integrity of the site to hold up. Like, you knew going in that you were going to be changing copy a lot. You might be, putting a different color background or your brand color background on some sections as you go. Just those moves are easy for you to make because the structure was made with that in mind. Just like an architect would a house, like they're really solving the problems that you think you might have or you've had with previous houses or whatever. So really approaching it again, that the form and function meet, but that functional and structural portions of your website are really sound. Not only in that, like, they can support what you're going to do, but things that you might try in the future, and you have knowledge of it so that you're, not adding the second story onto the ranch home that you wanted. Like, then things get a little weird. Like, you got to put a staircase in, et cetera, et cetera. And it makes your website awkward. Only the person that built the staircase kind of knows what moves they can make reliably, et cetera. So just keeping that in mind. And then don't, it's almost like a word of caution versus the first nug we talked about, which is like, don't fall into the trap of making your website resonate with every possible visitor. Like, when we say making it feel like it's for them, you can only make it feel like it's for them if it's targeted at them. It's not going to work to have it be like awesome for everybody. And that's where, like, Apple and Nike are these things that are always tossed out there, like, but they're such huge brands. They sort of transcend some of these things in some ways, but they still do a really good job of it, right? That they're still able, sort of like, even Apple, right? Like, they have an enemy. It's always this Apple and Android thing. So it's like, there's still a very, albeit broad, but specific group of people that might be drawn to one or the other. Like, always keeping that in mind. If you don't have any sort of like enemies or, for lack of a better word, of your brand, it's like, it's probably pretty vague, and it's not going to quite serve, your ideal customer, especially early on. Like, you got to have ideal early on. If you hit that 1 trillion mark, like Apple does, you probably have a slightly different strategy than anything we'll ever talk about on this show. And then lastly, like, invest in the tools and processes that allow you to do those first 3 things that we talked about, and things we talked about in the show. Like, obviously, we're leaning heavily into visual tools for this because we think it makes basically everything easier. But you should feel more empowered in your next platform and your next website than you do now, like, no matter who you are. And by that, we mean like getting the things that are important updated and out the door to your customers live on your site as quickly and as impactfully as possible. So, like, always be asking yourself that question. And it's another one of those thought exercises you can do in every meeting, even if you're not changing, right? What would we change? Like, if we were looking for a new platform or we're building a new website, what 2 things might change the game for us, help us reach our objectives a little bit more quickly? So, yeah, I think those are the things that are top of mind for me.
Nice. Yeah, all good stuff. If there was one nug I would throw in here, aside from Mike's question of what's the dumbest thing we could do here, the nug I would throw out is look and rework your processes in order to make your website like the core of your marketing team. I think that was the first thing we shared there, and there's a lot that it's not as simple as like saying throwing out a decree saying it's now the center of your digital marketing strategy, but you got to think about how exactly, what you need to do that. So I would just kind of throw that nug out there to make sure that your website is the heart and soul of your digital strategy.
The final thing, is, just thinking through, like, if you're a marketing leader, like, you're going to hear and you're going to talk about all these things like future proofing your business. And that just gets back to, again, driving home the tenets of what we talked about before, that architectural kind of mindset, having your priorities. Like, make sure that you're being proactive in those things. We do this all the time in and out of our website. Like, it's probably like the single most important thing we do. Like, what are the pathways that can decrease operating costs over time, even if it costs you more up front, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have a longer view of things. Like, this website will cost more than our last one, probably because of inflation. So shout out to inflation, but more importantly, maybe it wasn't thought out in this way. Maybe you didn't have an eye on what your website's doing 18 months after it gets launched. Maybe you didn't have an eye on the things that you're going to be audit and optimizing for. And like, that's how you future-proof it, is just understanding, like, over the next 2 years at a minimum, this is what we hope our website to be able to do. And that also is just going to make it easier. It's going to drive conversions better, because again, you're just thinking about it in that way. It's going to give you a better understanding of what your budget is. It's going to give you a better understanding of, those weekly, bi-weekly audits. Like, you need somebody to be doing those things to keep your website on track and get the most value out of it. So, holler at your boys at Huck, or at Huck Finch. Like, find out how Webflow can help you with these things. And obviously, we're open to just talking through some of these things at a business level as well. We're fascinated by these things and how we can make what we do better for you to kind of accomplish these things. So hit us up and comment, especially if you have questions or clarifications along this line. We love this kind of stuff.
Yeah, solid CTA there. No notes. So with that, boys and girls, there you have it. You have some spicy nugs. You have 3 ways on how to make your website more efficient, as so it can grow and scale with you as your business does. And guess what? We just dropped another banger.
Instant classic.
We did it. So you made it to the end, and there's only 2 reasons why you did it. It's one, because you absolutely freaking love the 2 guys here talking about Webflow, making corny ass jokes and weird references. Or you just turned this baby on, or somehow YouTube's algorithm just put you on here and you just were too lazy to turn it off. But you're here. So help your boys out by liking the video, throwing in some comments, any questions, subscribing to the channel to help us get the Liquid Death to become a sponsor, or something the equivalent of Liquid Death. And yeah, just make sure to keep coming back, because we're going to be rolling out more content all the time. So just do it.